Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to review this video talking about the college football playoff format and what potentially we could see in the way of changes. It says after a messy opening weekend, everyone has their own ideas on how to fix the playoff. Here's what's actually being considered. So, I guess my first question would be in terms of the seeding. Right now, the playoff will not be expanding to 14 teams. The earliest that can happen is 2026. So next year we will still have the 12-team playoff, but I would expect likely in 2026 the playoff to be expanded to 14 teams, which could change the entire format and also championship weekend. They want to add more inventory, not subtract from it. I understand people are saying the conference championships are meaningless now. You look at what happened with Penn State compared to Oregon. Oregon wins and they get very likely a worse draw than Penn State. But the way that they're going to make them more meaningful is by adding more games on conference championship weekend, basically play-in games. If you do give around 4 auto bids in a 14-team league, 4 auto bids to the Big Ten and the SEC, and then likely 3 of those auto bids get taken by teams that win on conference championship Sunday, or on conference championship Saturday. And then the final spot in each of those conferences would be decided by an at-large. But they would have at least 4 spots, both of those conferences, which does make sense considering how good those conferences are. I know people are also very angry about the blowouts. There's going to be blowouts in college football. When it comes to SMU getting in over Alabama, it is what it is. You could, Indiana making it. I think Indiana probably should have made it, even though it's kind of a weird situation at 11-1, but they didn't face anyone. But let's just skim through this article and see what they're talking about. 12 teams or 24 teams or 36, there's always going to be 5 schools outside looking in who are unhappy. We can't solve that. That was a former Big Ten commissioner. We put a premium on winning a conference championship as a difficult accomplishment and one that deserved to be heavily weighted. Well, the problem with that is you're treating all conferences equally when you give all of the conference champions in the Power Four, or technically it's not in the Power Four, but just in general, you give the conference champions the auto bye. Now, you could do it to where all of the conference champions get in, but giving them all the auto bye, that's where it becomes a problem. That's why we saw teams like Arizona State be bumped up to number 4, Boise State be bumped up to number 3, and now you've got a totally warped bracket to where Penn State gets Boise State in the second round because they had to give Boise State, even with a Mountain West schedule, they had to give Boise State the bye because the ACC was terrible. And you'd figure the ACC would take up one of the top 4 spots, but Clemson ends up winning the ACC. It puts a monkey wrench into that. And you've also got a problem with the Big 12 to where the Big 12 is not very good this year, but somebody has to get that 4th and final auto bid. So the problem is not rewarding conference championship winners. The problem is treating all the conferences equally by giving them all that first auto bye. You can allow them to all be in, but their seeding shouldn't be decided because the conferences are different in terms of how good they are. So it's like Arizona State can get in, but they're likely going to be the 11th seed. They don't get a first round bye just because they won a crappy conference. That's basically what I'm saying. And I think that's what the question is, can they change that format next year? Can they do things with the seeding this offseason to make it better for next year? Or do they have to wait until after next year to change the structure, which they're going to change significantly, especially if they expand it to 14 teams, which I'm sure they want to do because it's more money for them, it's more games. And then it's also the idea of adding the conference championship weekend, more games on conference championship weekend. They're going to try and make the conference championship more meaningful because right now, there are arguments, depending on which game you play in, it could be better to lose. Like if Oregon would have lost, they would have been the 5 seed. They would have faced Clemson, and they would be basically Texas right now. You look at Texas in their second round game, they're facing Arizona State, they're 13-point favorites. They were 13-point favorites last week against Clemson. So that's the problem with the conference championship weekend. You've also got, let's move down here. You can see this is just the overall bracket. And you can see the commissioners struck a new 6-year agreement that extends the college football playoff as an entity through 2031. Changes to the format starting in 2026. However, you can see as part of the new 6-year extension, the conferences agreed to cede decision-making powers on format to the SEC and the Big Ten. At least that's what those 2 leagues claim. but with certain agreed upon guarantees of any format. Number one, the automatic inclusion of the 5 highest ranked conference champions, and number two, a protection for independent Notre Dame if the school finishes high enough in the committee's rankings. So it seems like they're going to give the Big Ten and the SEC, at least according to the Big Ten and the SEC, free reins on the format outside of the inclusion. You're going to have to include. So if it gets expanded to 14 teams, my prediction is you're going to get 4 auto bids from the Big Ten, 4 auto bids from the SEC. People are saying, well, there's going to be 2 auto bids. I don't know if there's going to be 2 auto bids from any conference. Like, would they give 2 auto bids from the ACC to balance everything in the Big 12? Because then you're talking about right there, that's 12 teams. And then it would be Notre Dame. Because then there's, I don't know if they would do that. I guess that's the real question. Or would it be cut down to only 3 auto bids? Maybe it's 3 auto bids in the Big Ten, 3 auto bids in the SEC, 2 in the ACC, 2 in the Big 12, because then you're only at a total of 7 schools right there. You can add the group of 5 team. You can add Notre Dame. You're only at 9. Now you've got 5 at-large spots, and probably 3 of those spots would go to the SEC. 2 of those spots could go to the Big Ten, but that might be something you end up doing. So I think there's going to be, in 2026, I think apparently they're going to have to keep the same model in 2025, unfortunately. But in 2026, I do think they will change things significantly. So this is about seeding. Speaking of Boise State and Arizona State, the 2 programs that were beneficiaries of a format seeding structure that may be the first item on the chopping block. Despite being ranked 9th and 12th by the selection committee, the Broncos and Sun Devils were seeded number 3 and number 4 as required by a format rules designating the 4 highest ranked conference champions as seeds 1 through 4 and recipients of the first round bye. In this year's playoff, the rule has resulted in unequal seeding and bracketing, and you can see they're talking about the examples that I've discussed. The conference championship seeding rule and the 12-team format in general was intended for a world that featured 5 somewhat equitable power champions and not the current landscape of 4 inequitable power leagues. And so it looks like the SEC commissioner acknowledged that. And the question is, when is this going to be changed? When the college football playoff leaders meet for their annual gathering at the championship game in Atlanta, there is a likelihood that there will at least be discussion on eliminating the rule designating the top 4 seeds and byes for conference champions, and thus seeding directly based on the committee's rankings. And so that really is what needs to happen. And so I wonder if that can be implemented for 2025. You can still allow whoever wins the Big 12 to make the playoff, but you can't give them an auto bye. And technically, that's not how it is, because you could get a group of 5 team that passes them, just like we saw with Clemson. I mean, Clemson won a Power 4 league, but they didn't get a bye because the Boise State was ranked higher than them. But still, Boise State moved way up. Clemson moved way up from like number 17 to number 12, but they won their conference. And then Arizona State moved way up. So that's the real thing, crux of the argument is doing this. And that would be the first step in saying, look, we can keep the auto bids. You can still make, if you win your conference championship, you make your playoff, but you're not going to get an auto bye. That cannot happen, because then that creates this weird seeding where the number 1 team in college football is kind of screwed. I mean, the number 1 team in college football, the only undefeated team is underdogs in their first game of the playoff. And so that's created from Arizona State and Boise State moving up because they won their conferences and they were it's just a little bit of a mess. And then you've got this multiple auto qualifiers. Among some league administrators, there is some talk of a proposal that grants a single conference multiple automatic qualifiers. Specifically in the 14-team proposal, the Big Ten and the SEC would receive 4 auto qualifiers, each presumably determined through conference standings. 2 each for the ACC and Big 12, 1 for the group of 5, and 1 at large intended for Notre Dame. Wow, so they want to go fully auto. They want to, so they want 4 auto. And I guess, in a 14-team field, I think 4 is enough for the Big 10 and the SEC. The ACC and the Big 12 each get 2. I mean, you could argue, I don't know, man. I guess you could find 2 good enough Big 12 and ACC teams, but those conferences are really lacking right now. I mean, do you want to make, boy, they're really taking it away from the committee and then if you play play-in games on conference championship weekend, that would be interesting. The Big Ten made a similar proposal. This proposal is 4-4 because 4 auto qualifiers in the Big Ten, the SEC 2-2, ACC Big 12 1-1. Notre Dame would be the one, and then the group of 5 would be the other. Big Ten has made a similar proposal during the meetings in the spring, but the proposals featured one less auto qualifier in the Big Ten and the SEC. Yeah, that's not. See, I don't like the scale of that. The Big Ten and the SEC are just significantly better than the ACC and the Big 12. It shouldn't be 3-2 for the auto qualifiers on those. I mean, not that I guess it would matter, but no, I would say, or you go 3-3-1-1, 1-5, and then you give 5 group at-larges. I think it'd be something like that. If the 4-4-2-2-1-1 model were used this year, the SEC and Big 12 would have gotten one more team into the field, Alabama and Iowa State. I mean, I guess that would be fine. Then they talk about the weekly ratings show. I don't think that's a big problem. I don't understand. Game sites. There's another discussion point to be made at game sites. The success of the 4 on-campus first-round games, each was either sold out or nearly sold out, has sparked some conversation. Should the quarterfinals and even semifinals be held on campus as well? Well, that would be huge if that ends up happening. But I'm not sure how you could swing that in terms of these NutriSite games and the amount of money that's made off of them. Yeah, I'm not sure how if that would happen. I mean, that would be pretty cool if they at least made the quarterfinals on campus. Because right now, as it stands, the top 4 seeds, they just play NutriSite games all the way through. Because this next round is all NutriSite. So you could do this round as well on campus. But that would be a huge. I mean, imagine Oregon on campus against Ohio State. Because it is a lot of NutriSite games. Because the quarterfinals, that's going to be 4 games NutriSite. Semifinals 2 games. National championship 1 game. But yeah, I mean, more on-campus games is good for college football, but that becomes, the seeding becomes very critical because on-campus games is a huge advantage, and it would extend past just the first round into the quarterfinals. Maybe they would just do the quarterfinals. The semifinals would probably be, I would say, NutriSite still. But it is interesting because, like, how do you work a New Year's 6 game into an on-campus game? How's a bowl game? So it's kind of weird. I mean, I guess they could do it. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.